Throughout tornado season, Kansas Cityans keep our weather ticker, if you will, on high guard as tornadoes sweep through Kansas City area, including most of the state of Kansas and some of the state of Missouri. Tornadoes can bring high winds, hail, property damage, and consequences of these storms. It can take months for communities to recover from the aftermaths of these storms and what it can do to not just one specific house, but communities at large. This has raised a really critical question as to whether or not Kansas City or the metropolitan area is a good place for you and your family to live. Well, in today's video, we're going to be talking about the reality of tornadoes, how that affects the Kansas City metropolitan area, and then hopefully you will be making an informed decision on some of the information that I provide to you, and hopefully it will help you make a determining factor on whether or not Kansas City is perfect for you. And if we've never met before, my name is Anita Cordell, and I make videos about Kansas City, what it's like to live here, what it's like to work here, what it's like to play here, and of course, I talk about the weather. Now, I've lived here in the Kansas City metropolitan area most of my life, and I have been through several tornado scares. In fact, multiple storms where the sirens have gone off and property damage around me or near me or even my property as well, which I'll talk about a little later. But I've been in those types of scenarios. And I've lived on both the Kansas side as well as the Missouri side of the Kansas City metropolitan area. Some people make a determining factor on where they want to live, so I've lived on both sides of the state line. So we are going to dive deep into what it's like to live in a city that's got risk when it comes to tornadoes. And we're going to get to that in today's video. So let's first cover the geographical location of Kansas City. One of the things that you will want to understand is that Kansas City sits on the state line of Kansas and Missouri. Now, Kansas City sits in what we call Tornado Alley. This is part of the U.S. that is really more susceptible to tornadoes, and there are multiple states that are in Tornado Alley, including Kansas, Texas, Oklahoma, and parts of Missouri as well. Now, I'm going to share with you about the number of tornadoes. So when we're talking about the Tornado Alley, we always look at Kansas and Texas usually as some of those states with higher numbers of tornadoes. One of the things that people have done is research on the amount of tornadoes that each state has had. When researchers decide how affected a state is, oftentimes they will take an actual square mile area versus just the state in general. So I've seen research broken out by 10,000 square miles, and so that way it's easily comparable to, you know, like the state of Maine, which is little, compared to Texas, which is huge. So most states have 1 to 3 tornadoes per a 10,000 square mile area. Missouri gets 8 tornadoes per 10,000 square miles. And surprisingly, Texas gets 3 tornadoes per 10,000 square miles. And oftentimes they'll look at the number of tornadoes in that state, but you got to remember that it is so big. So when you come to the amount of square miles that it is, it decreases that by, you know, those numbers. So Texas gets 3, Missouri gets 8 tornadoes per 10,000 square miles. Kansas gets 11. Now, Kansas actually, surprisingly, is not the highest. Mississippi gets 13 tornadoes per 10,000 square miles. But when you're talking about the Tornado Alley, Kansas and Texas are very high. And in fact, nationwide, Kansas is number 3 when it comes to judging it by the square miles, and then number 2 when it comes to the amount of tornadoes in that state. Kansas gets an average of 83 tornadoes per year, while Missouri gets 46. Now, since Kansas City is right in Tornado Alley, that means that the city overall, the metropolitan area, both on the Kansas side and the western Missouri side, it makes this city vulnerable to tornadoes. While tornadoes can happen anytime throughout the year, the tornado season actually is March through June, and then the highest peak or highest risk time frame is April, May, and June. But the reality of it is tornadoes can actually happen all year long. In fact, about 15 years ago, there was a tornado that happened on New Year's Eve. It was a 1/4 mile radius tornado and did a lot of damage, and it wasn't even in tornado season. Now, I'm making this video in the fall which technically is not tornado season, but you can see it's lovely outside. However, again, it's important to note that storms can happen all year long, and there's multiple tornadoes that happen outside of the tornado season. And there's some years that there's a lot of activity, and then there's some years that actually it's kind of quiet. Now here's the cool part. Kansas City has not experienced a massive tornado storm since 2007. And prior to that, 1957 was the last time that there was a major tornado storm here in this area. Those two tornadoes were the worst tornadoes that have happened in the Kansas City metropolitan area. The Ruskin Heights tornado happened in 1957, and the Greensboro tornado happened in 2007. Kansas City still remains very vulnerable to tornadoes, and yes, tornadoes actually still drop down here, but those two have been the worst tornadoes in our history. Now, I do want to mention a tornado that happened. It just really damaged the city of Joplin. I want to make mention of that, even though it's not in the Kansas City metropolitan area. And Joplin, Missouri, just so you know, is about 2.5 hours away from the Kansas City metropolitan area. It happened May 22nd in 2011, and this tornado just damaged so much of the city of Joplin. It was basically destroyed a lot of the whole entire city. This EF5 multi-vortex storm, this tornado, reached a maximum of about 1 mile wide and just blew through the city. There were winds that were about 200 miles per hour, and it destroyed everything in its path within a 6-mile radius. There were 158 people that were killed and over 1,000 people that were injured. One of the things about Missourians and Kansas Cityans is that oftentimes you'll see us out looking at the storms coming in, and a lot of times people have not experienced living through a tornado or having their property damaged by one. And so oftentimes you'll see people chasing storms or sitting out with their cameras watching the storms come in, and they just think it's like super cool. It's not uncommon for that to be in existence. Well, my friend's parents were living in Joplin, and they were doing just that. They were watching the storm and didn't think it would affect them, didn't think it was as big and vast as what it was, and the sirens were going off, and they were watching it, you know, from their windows, and all of a sudden they heard the storm coming. When I'm talking about hearing a tornado coming, it literally sounds like a freight train right in your backyard. It's so loud. And they heard it, and they realized that they were right in the middle of the storm. They ran downstairs, and just within seconds, the tornado went over their home, and their home was in that path, and so their home was destroyed. I actually was able to go down to Joplin and help give out water and food and gifts for children and things like that, and it was just devastating to see. Yet I have personally never experienced a tornado, nor have I seen one, but a lot of people here still remember the Joplin tornado, and so we have this respect for the weather and for tornadoes. But I personally have never seen one, but I have experienced the aftermath of them. Now, as you're learning about the tornado season, you're gonna hear people talking about a tornado watch and a tornado warning. And I want to explain to you what the difference is between those two before we go on. So if you are seeing on your phone a tornado watch, that means just watch the area, watch what is happening on your weather channels, watch what's happening out in, you know, the sky, and just keep an eye on what is happening, because a watch means that the conditions are perfect for a tornado, and you want to just make sure that you understand that something could happen. A warning means that we're in action, a tornado is here, make sure that you are taking cover, and there could be some life-threatening situations that happen. So a watch is just keeping your eye on what's happening. A warning is something's happening and beware. Now, just keep in mind, I am not a weather girl, but I know things about living here, and so I just want to keep that in mind. Know that when the sirens go off, it could mean something different for every single area that you're in. Now, if you're moving to the Kansas City area, you may wonder why the sirens are going off during the middle of the week. Well, here in Kansas City, and in my specific city, on Wednesdays at 11 o'clock Central Standard Time, they turn on the sirens every single week for a test. So sometimes I'm sitting there with a phone call, or I forget that they're happening, or doing a video, and all of a sudden the sirens go off. And I have to actually jolt back into reality and look at the weather and just make sure that, you know, there's not actually a tornado going on, but the sirens will go off. And so if you're in an area like that, just understand that once a week, typically, they will test the sirens out just to make sure that they work and prepares the community for what they sound like. Now, during the storm, there are certain times that the siren will go off. You might want to wonder why the tornadoes are going to go off. So if there's a tornado watch, typically there won't be a siren. But if there's a warning, the sirens will start to go off. Also, if there's funnel clouds that have been formed, it will go off. If there's severe weather threats, they will go off. And when they go off, you need to take shelter. Now, during a real tornado storm, we will have, I call them wind bursts. We have hail, we experience strong rain, property damage. Sometimes the wind gets so high that the property damage can literally plow through your yard. In fact, that's happened twice here in our property. We've had several trees that literally just by the wind knocks down and the tree is gone. We've had our house missed several times by about 10 feet, and yet we've always had our house spared. Now, even though we haven't had a massive tornado storm since 2007, we have tornadoes here in the Kansas City area. In fact, I'm making this video in 2024, and just this May, there were several tornadoes that hit down in my old neighborhood in Shawnee, Kansas. In fact, it was about 2 blocks from my old house. Close to Comfort, but none of the properties there were damaged. There was a lot of trees that were down, there were fences that were damaged, but no homes were destroyed, which was such a God thing. Now, I'm going to be talking about what you do to prepare for a tornado. So what kinds of things can you do in advance to prepare yourself for a tornado storm? So I'm going to give you 6 different things that you can do. The first thing is to teach yourself or to get a little comfortable with first aid. So whether you can take a class or teach your kids as well, just learn a little bit about first aid when it comes to cuts and things like that. You don't have to actually be this medical professional, but just learn enough and make sure that you have a first aid kit available as well. Just teach your family how to administer basic first aid. The second thing to do in a tornado is to make sure that you have a place to go. Map it out or have a plan of where you're going to go, and this includes in your own home as well as outside of your home. A lot of places here in the Kansas City area have basements, and so if you have that as your plan, if you're home, especially if it's at nighttime, make sure that your family knows when those sirens go off, you head right to the basement. Bunker down basically in your basement. If you don't have a basement, make sure that you have a community location or some place where you know of that will open up to those people who don't have basements or who are just out and about or not near their home. So make sure that when you're around, especially if you're going to visit a friend or something and the weather is getting bad, make sure that you know what your plan is if there is a tornado. A third thing that you can do when you're preparing for tornado season is to remove any projectile type of things around your house. If there's a storm coming and they're anticipating it getting really bad, you might want to go ahead and move all of your deck furniture into your garage, or big plants or things like that that are outside. If the wind comes, it can't break through into any glass or damage your property that way. The fourth thing to do to prepare yourself for tornado season is just learn what the risks are when it comes to a storm. Learn what a storm looks like. Learn what a funnel cloud looks like. Learn what the risks are in your community. You might be in an area that is higher risk than another area. Just be aware of those things and make sure that you understand what is happening. Watch your weather channel. Get as educated as you possibly can so that you're not surprised. Fifth thing to do to prepare for tornado season is to prepare your family and your loved ones. That includes packing a set of clothes for each one of your family members. I call it my go bag. And so make sure that you have your go bag ready for when that happens. That includes putting shoes or boots in there. Also, stockpile some water and canned goods. Make sure that if you have a basement storage area where that's going to be your safe place, put some of that stuff already down there so that you have some food and water if you're down there for an extensive amount of time. Also, make sure that in your bag you have your medication, and consider your pets as well. That means making sure that they have some food, water. Just make sure that all of the family members, including your their pets are taken care of and they're planned for. The last thing that you can do to prepare for tornado season is to make sure that you prepare your property. That means trimming back those tree branches that are hanging over your roof. Have your roof inspected as well, and make sure that when you're inspecting the roof to make sure that there's not major damage already to the roof to that tornado would make it worse. Now, when we're talking about real estate in Kansas City and we're talking about the various houses and the house styles, and a lot of people want basements for various reasons. Some people want a basement for extra storage room. A lot of times people will want basements because they like the basement finished so that they can have extra living space. A lot of times there's an extra bedroom downstairs, or you can put almost a mother-in-law's quarters in your basement. So there's a lot of advantages to having a basement, but then there's also the advantage of wanting a basement because you have that space to go in case there's inclement weather. Now, to be honest with you, I have always lived in a home with a basement, and yet I've never seen a tornado. But let's talk about what people want in the homes here in Kansas City. This last year, I helped 2 retired people who were downsizing, and they were actually okay with buying a home that had no basement. So both of them purchased a property on a slab. What I'm finding is that a lot of 55 plus communities, they have like a community center, and so what I've found is that the community center will have a basement, and so if there's a lot of slab homes in that community, what'll happen is when the sirens go off, they'll go and open up the community, and a lot of the residents will go down into the basement and bunker down and hang out and play games and watch the weather and wait it out. Then there's also people in the communities that have a basement, so not every single home that is in an active adult community is on a slab. A lot of them are, but there are some homes that have basements, and then what happens is people have this community feel, and so if somebody purchases a home that's on a slab, the people that have a basement will invite all of those people over to their home for a safe place to come and bunker down and hang out. So when they live in a community that's slabs, there are options. Plus, the city usually offers up a building that will, something that people can come to. So if there is a warning out and people are starting to get nervous, they'll open up the community center, or they'll open up whatever building is designated as a storm shelter, and those people will be able to go to there. So just because you are living in a slab does not mean that you won't have a place to go if there's a tornado. Now, I'm going to be talking about the homes here. So if you are considering a property, or you're wanting to move here and you're considering, you know, what do I do? Do I buy a house with a basement? Do I buy a house that's on a slab? What do I do when it comes to that? So these numbers are for 6 main counties that I monitor in the metropolitan area. Those 6 counties include 2 on the Kansas side and 4 on the Missouri side. Now, you're asking why it's not 3 and 3. Well, the Kansas City metropolitan area is shaped in such a way to where that most of the residents are in the Missouri side, and there's 2 counties on the Kansas side. So it just is the way it is, but Johnson County is very, very big. On the Kansas side of Kansas City, there are 2 counties. One's Wyandotte and one is Johnson. And keep in mind, these are the 6 main counties of the Kansas City metropolitan area. So the other 4 that I'm going to talk about: Cass County, Clay County, Jackson County, and Platte County. So among those 6 counties, those are the ones that I'm going to give you the numbers for. As of the time that I'm recording this video, the last 30 days, there were 1,968 properties that were sold. And out of those 1,968 properties, 196 of them had no basement. So it's basically 10% of the homes that were sold did not have basements. And 10 years ago in this month, there were 2,398 properties that sold here in those counties. And out of those, there were 217 properties that did not have basements. That's 9%. So you can see that there's been a little climb in the number of properties that don't have basements. And currently, right now, in those counties, there were 4,397 properties that are currently for sale, and 432 of them do not have basements. So it's right at 10%. Now, I've been asked before whether or not we have tornado insurance here. The answer is no. There's no tornado insurance. It's unlike, you might live in an area on the Gulf or someplace like that you live in a susceptible area where you're required to have flood insurance. That's not here. Now, there are certain pockets in the Kansas City metropolitan area that are in flood zones, but that's few and far between, and we do require flood insurance if you live in those pockets. But as a general rule, we do not have tornado insurance here. Now, you're probably wondering, Anita, why are you making this video? Why are you telling people about tornadoes, and why are you telling them about the weather and talking about what happens in a tornado, and aren't you going to scare people? Well, to be honest with you, I need to be able to share the truth with you if you are considering moving to the Kansas City metropolitan area. There's always pros and cons to everything, whether that's a place to live, whether that's a place to go and work. There's always pros and cons, and it's my job to share with you pros and cons about things like this. In my opinion, we have incredible weather here. Now, do we have snow? Yes. But when I say incredible, we enjoy the fact that there are, and you can hear my cicadas up above. I'm sitting here on my back porch. I'm loving the sunset. I'm loving how the sun is coming through. We actually have about 215 sunny days in the whole entire year of Kansas City. That to me is incredible. I love fall. I love the trees turning. It's my favorite season. I love wearing sweaters, and I love just the overall essence and vibe of fall. And I don't mind winter. It's not that horrible. In fact, some people will move here and they absolutely love playing in the snow and enjoying just the all four seasons. And in my opinion, we truly do have incredible weather here. I mean, does it get hot? Yes, but for the most part, can't complain. And I think any place will have its challenges, including Kansas City. But to me, enjoying a night like this is awesome. But I understand that when tornadoes come, we have to deal with that. We have to deal with hail damage. We have to deal with wind bursts, which was something that I experienced because our tree fell literally down near our home. We had to get family and friends to come over and help us get it hauled away because so many trees were down, and the tree service companies were backed up days. We used to have a basketball hoop in our yard, and a wind burst came through and just knocked it down, and it came within 2 feet of one of our cars, but our car didn't get damaged. So we've experienced property damage like this and near misses. But if you're going to live in a city such as Kansas City that is prone to having tornadoes, it's something that we have to deal with, and it's something that we kind of not really expect, but we just keep on guard with. Now, personally, knowing all this and knowing about the tornadoes and experiencing the Joplin tornado, it has not caused me to say, Anita, we've got to move away from the Kansas City area. I also take those sirens seriously, and when the sirens go off, I'm not one that will sit outside and watch the storm come in. I take it serious. I've seen the consequences. I've seen the aftermaths, and I have had to clean up messes. And so I make my family go down in the basement. We are not a family who sits and watches the storm come through and hope that we see a tornado live. We're just not that family. But I have friends who've seen tornadoes. I just have personally not ever seen one. But I have been through storms with sirens, and we go down to the basement and we bunker down until it's all over. And if I didn't live here, would knowing about tornadoes keep me from moving here if the opportunity came? The answer is no, it wouldn't. That is me, and I understand that there are natural disasters everywhere. I've known of some of my friends who have been in hurricanes and have had to move to, 3 hours away for a week or two until it gets cleared out. There's natural disasters everywhere, and tornadoes have not caused me to stay away from this area. We just have to know that we don't control the weather, and to be honest with you, hurricanes kind of scare me a little bit more than tornadoes do. And when it comes to insurance, you're going to want a really great insurance agent to make sure that your deductibles are good and that your policy is good. You're going to want a really great agent and a team to help you walk through that process of purchasing a home and knowing where to live and knowing what kind of property to get. I am a licensed real estate agent, and I've had so many Zoom calls who are people who have moved moved here or who are wanting to move here, and they're needing help with the purchase of a home. And if you're interested in having a deeper conversation, feel free to jump into the description below and hop into my calendar. All my contact information is in there, and there's actually a link to my calendar where you can schedule a time that is most convenient for you. And I would be honored to be your representative and to help you make any kind of transition that you need to make. Now, on a side note, just to add to this, when I was talking about preparation, a lot of people cannot afford a generator, or they just haven't prioritized it in their investing. Knowing this and knowing that we have power outages here in the Kansas City metropolitan area, it might be wise to consider buying a generator when you move here. What it will do is it'll keep your food cold. It'll just provide you with that peace of mind and give you some extra power and help even your neighbors if you need to. If you don't have the means or want to do a generator, you can also get like solar chargers for your phone. I even have like a little solar oven, and I made one. It's kind of fun. Things like that will help, and especially if you're at power outages for several days or even a week. It doesn't happen like that very much, but you just want to think about some things like that and help your family to be prepared. Our cities here do a really fantastic job of trying to get the power back on as quick as possible. But like I said, you might want to just consider getting a generator just to be on the safe side. I actually have a family member who thinks as well about ice. She puts like a ton of ice, a couple, 2 or 3 big bags of ice, and she always keeps them in her freezer so that if something were to occur, she would have ice and just have that available to keep the food in her freezer colder for a little bit longer. Now, when it comes to the reality of living in the Kansas City metropolitan area, both on the Kansas side as well as the Missouri side, it is a really fantastic place to live. We have so much to do. There's a lot of entertaining that goes on. Art is amazing. The culture is amazing. We've got a lot of job opportunities here with growing businesses. We've got Google coming here, Meta. We've got so much going on here. And Overland Park is a fantastic city to live in. There's so many job opportunities in that city alone. There are beautiful neighborhoods to live in, including, this may surprise you, but there's a lot of lake communities here. We've got great sports teams, a lot of entertainment. We've got fantastic barbecue and so much more. So there's a lot of benefits to living here in Kansas City, and I've made a lot of videos on this channel about our city and things to do and places to go, places to eat. However, I do understand that moving to an area that's got tornadoes can make people a little anxious. But one of the things that I've learned over time is while we need to be prepared, we need to be vigilant, we need to be cognizant of what is happening and the risks involved. For the most part, my life and the lives of my friends have not been hugely significantly impacted on a great scale from tornadoes here in the Kansas City metropolitan area. Now, I am going to give the big caveat that at the end of the day, anything can happen. There could be a storm that rolls through here, and the possibility of that statement being incorrect tomorrow. I get that. But as for me and my family, we prepare, we keep ourselves safe, we make sure that we follow proper protocol, we make sure that we go down in the basement, and make sure that we take tornadoes seriously when we hear those sirens go off. And here's the cool thing. You usually get some kind of notice. We watch the weather, we listen to weather channels, we see the storms coming in, and we are given some kind of notice that if there's a risk of tornadoes, then we are already prepared and we stay inside and make sure that we stay home until the tornado is over. And for me, it's kind of cool that I don't live in an area where I actually have to pack up and leave town because of some natural disaster that could be coming. So hopefully, since you watched this video, you can make an informed decision about making a move to Kansas City and whether or not this place is good for you, and hopefully you get a little bit more informed about the tornado season and what you can or cannot do and some options for you if you move here. And once again, if you are considering moving here to the Kansas City area, don't hesitate to reach out to me and my team. We would love to help you. And I hope you get a ton of value out of today's video. Now, YouTube is going to give you a couple of videos to choose from, and out of those videos, hopefully you will find some more information about Kansas City. And as always, go out and live your best Kansas City life.